All right, David Moore, Equity Advantage with Bob Smith at Peregrine Private Capital. And if you were with us the last segment, great. You know what I said. If you weren't, you need to go watch it. But it ended with my buddy's comments on with the golden rule of success in real estate not being placed in a situation where you got to sell in a recession. So if you think about what we're talking about with the potential of a recession, I'm not saying we're in one, but maybe we're knocking on one, or maybe it's just been redefined where we're not in one today. But I think that you've got to look at what you're doing and understand something too. A lot of times when we're talking about people in exchanges, since, I mean, really the bottom line is you provide product for people that want to go replace properties through the exchange, and I'm providing the exchange services on stuff. So we like transactions. We like market velocity. We don't like things to get stopped. But if we look at something that happened last crash, and the bottom line is with any of the products we're looking at, it's really triggered by tax exposure. And I just want to put out there, you look at basis and gain and what triggers gain on disposition, and you got to understand that in a recession or even with a total loss of a property through foreclosure or short sale, that the debt on the property, if it exceeds the basis, you've got what's called phantom gain. So you could be in a situation where you lost the asset and you actually are stuck with a situation where you're going to pay tax for the pleasure of losing it. And I think that that's one of those big issues you got to understand going into something, or if you think we're going, I've got a lot of rent control refugees because rent control keeps chasing people out more and more all the time. And then we've got, if we had a map of the states and tax rates in our country, and we're sitting here in Portland, Oregon right now, which we are potentially looking at a max state tax rate of up to 14.6%, believe it or not, which would make us literally the worst in the country, short of New York if you make 25 million or more, which I sadly do not make. So I don't know. And you got to start looking at understanding really what your gain is on a disposition, what you're going to do with it. And I just want to caution people that on a residential foreclosure short sale, you've got tax relief income properties, you don't. So if we're looking at preservation of wealth and options that are there, and you start looking at places to go, I think that DST product is something that's unique because one of they call them the 7 deadly sins of a DST is there's no capital calls, right? So what might people consider, or what should they be considering moving forward right now? And if they're concerned about maybe a market collapsing, probably selling sooner rather than later would be a good idea too.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about rent control refugees up and down the West Coast. They've created in a very, very hostile environment with regard to income property ownership, particularly residential income property ownership. And you see more and more people leaving these high tax, high regulatory, heavy-handed regulatory blue states for no tax or low tax red states. And actually that process is not slowing down. It's accelerating. By way of example, I think Portland City proper net lost something like 20,000 people last year. Not all these people are moving out of state, but they are moving out of the downtown urban core areas because they've created, the progressive government solution for a breakdown in services and the quality of life is simply to continue raising taxes on the schmuck that remain. And so people are leaving for the suburbs, people are leaving for other states. So again, I think the theme is going to be, or the correct theme is to be as defensive from an investing standpoint as possible, which means that, probably investing in the burbs or ex-burbs where people are going or where the growth is occurring. I mean, a decade and a half ago, all the millennials wanted to be downtown because that's where all the action was, that's where all the fun was. Businesses followed them, and now that process it's reversing itself. And I think it would have reversed itself even without COVID. COVID exacerbated things, but things had become overpriced, and in becoming overpriced downtown, the quality of life was being degraded. So that process would have probably been started even without COVID. People are now migrating to the burbs, exurbs. So I think it's probably wise, whatever property type you're interested in or considering, be there rather than urban core areas.
I just love the way that politicians look at this stuff. Oh, we're losing tax revenue. Oh, people are leaving downtown. Oh, you know what? We need more money. So we're just going to jack up the tax rates for the people that are still here. Well, and then we're going to hit them with a capital gains tax too. That'll work.
It worked really well for Detroit. So I think it's going to work equally well for Seattle, Portland, San Francisco. I mean, these downtown cores have been hollowed out, not only from an out-migration of people accelerated or exacerbated by the pandemic and remote work trend, but also the steady degradation of the quality of life. I mean, cities came into being to begin with to facilitate commerce, because prior to modern communication, modern infrastructure to do business, you had to be close to someone or to something, and so that was the predicate for the growth of urban areas was commercialism, and coming out of that was wealth creation, and then coming out of that was an improvement or growth in cultural amenities. Well, that process, for better or for worse, is being reversed. You no longer need to be in proximity to other people to do work. It can be done remotely. Whether it's done as efficiently remotely or not, the jury's still out.
Yes. Okay. So along those lines, Bob, sorry to interrupt you, train of thought, but about a month and a half ago, buddy Kurt Arthur owns Sperry Van Ness out of Salem, and he had his annual sort of forecast breakfast, and he does a great job with the thing. But one of the slides that went up there talked about the percentage of employees that feel they work effectively from home, and it was like 80%. The percentage of employers that think the employees work effectively 20%. From home is 18%. So anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
But but remote work is here, and it's going to stay. To what extent it will have to be managed or modified, anybody's guess. But and in turn, so that's been diminished as a reason to be downtown. And progressive governments and their pro-crime policies have had a tremendous negative impact on the quality of life from a cultural standpoint in many progressively governed cities. So if you don't have to work there or be there to work anymore, and if the cultural draw is no longer as strong as it once was, there's a very, very good chance that these cities may never be again what they once were. So we think that from an income property type, you're best served to look for opportunities in the suburbs and exurbs, and they're not at as much of a premium price as urban areas are. And so I think we think it's a good idea to move in that direction. And again, given the inevitability of recession and the negative impact that wealth loss from that is going to create, you're probably well served to focus on habitational assets, those things that people need, whether the economy's up, down, or sideways. We think you just have to be prepared for a period of you're probably going to be doing well maintaining the integrity of invested equity, let alone growing it in an aggressive fashion. And in that context, the principal criticism of DST, its lack of liquidity, meaning an average 5-6 year hold period, may actually work to investors' benefit, allowing them to stabilize their equity and cash flow until such time as we are through this next the current real estate down cycle and embarking on another up cycle, which is then identifying what the next generation of opportunities are going to be. So, it's worth consideration.
Definitely. And like you said, I think the funny thing is, throughout my time working with them, I've obviously been in the exchange world for over 30 years, but working with the DST since their founding roughly, around 2000. And you think about that product, now it's evolved through time, but the number of times people sort of backed away because, one, they're used to having control of assets, and I would sort of respond like, well, who do you think's got more horsepower to get things done or more experience? A DST that's properly structured, or you dabbling in your rental houses? But two, that hold period, right? And right now, if you're picking something up right now, I mean, the typical hold's going to be 5 to 7 years for them, and I would hope that whatever's happening is over through that period of time. But I just sort of look at it, and back to my comment, that first segment with my buddy, and just talking about, hey, he wasn't really concerned about how much he was going to make right now. He just wanted it preserved. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good bookmark to get things handled right now. So don't go away. We'll be right back. David Moore, Equity Advantage, and Bob Smith, Peregrine Private Capital. Thank you.